everyone, welcome back to Geek University. Today we'll be learning a little bit about anime. We're going to be discussing the different genres of the medium and what makes it so popular here in the United States. But before we dive into all of that, let's start our journey with a little bit of history. So in Japan, anime is a term that simply means animation. It refers to all types of animation from anywhere in the world. However, when you're outside of Japan, anime is typically used to describe only animation that comes directly from Japan itself. For the purposes of today's video, this is how we will be using it. There's been some debate recently over the origins of the word anime. The English word animation is typically written in Japanese phonetics as animation. The belief here is that when the word was adopted into Japanese, it was shortened to its current form of anime. There is also a widely held belief that the word is derived from the French word for animation, which also happens to be anime. This is due to the vast rise in popularity of Japanese anime in France in the 1970s. This was around the same time the word anime was starting to be used in Japan. Being influenced by animation pioneers from other parts of the globe, Japanese filmmakers began experimenting on their own with animation in the early part of the 20th century. The first known animation from Japan is a short from 1907 called Katsudo Shashin. It is a brief animation showing a man writing in Japanese calligraphy. This short was never released commercially and was made by an unknown artist. By 1917, more professional works began showing up on display. Unfortunately, the Great Kanto earthquake in 1923 destroyed a warehouse that was sheltering most of these early works, taking the films and their history with them. The oldest known surviving film from this era is a short film called Namakura Katana, which was about a samurai and his sword. The animation profession in Japan continued to grow over the next few decades and would continue to be inspired by those from other countries. In particular, Japanese animators would look to the American animation studio Disney for their cues. After the success of Disney's first full-length animated feature, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in 1937, Japanese animators began the process of making their own. And in 1944, with sponsorship from the Japanese Imperial Navy, the first full-length animated feature from Japan debuted. It was called Momotaro's Divine Sea Warriors and was meant as a bit of propaganda to gather up support for the Japanese Navy during World War II. Regardless of its message, this film marked a new era of Japanese animation, and many more feature-length films followed. After World War II, Japanese animators were freed from government sponsorship and were now able to start producing more original works. They began to draw inspiration from Japanese history and lore, but there was one problem. The cost of producing animation began to rise quickly, and it was also incredibly time-consuming. Animation studios began to search for cheaper, quicker ways to make their films. Enter Osamu Tezuka, the godfather of Japanese animation. Tezuka began his career as a manga artist shortly after World War II. After gaining a name for himself there with his various comics, he decided to branch out into animation. And in 1961, he creates Mushi Productions. He uses his new company as a springboard to standardizing anime production and style. Tezuka believes that by doing so, it will lower the cost and production time for his company's projects. He begins to incorporate Disney's style and framework into his own, and his first major anime innovation would come in 1963 when Mushi Productions' Astro Boy becomes the first animated TV serial in Japan. This new standardized style allows his company to cheaply produce episodes quickly for television. And even though animation has become more detailed and fluid in recent decades, this standardization of style is still in use today and remains his biggest legacy. I mean, just look at those doe eyes. So now that we know how anime came to be, what is it that drives people to it? In particular, what makes America such a hotbed for anime consumption? Well, throughout most of its history, American animation has been considered children's fare, and American studios cranked out cookie-cutter animated children's programming left and right. It didn't matter if it was for TV or the big screen. Most American animation was made specifically for very young audiences. However, in Japan, animators would continue to use animation as a vehicle to tell complex stories about people, life, and history. They experimented with just about every genre imaginable. Everything from science fiction to slice-of-life drama to even pornography was being animated. The lure of more adult content with more complex themes, stories, and characters drew in many American fans during the 80s and 90s. Flash forward to today, and America is now the largest consumer of anime outside of Japan. In fact, many anime titles are produced specifically for an American market release. As more dubbed titles began cracking the American TV market, the more popular the medium became. Early shows like Astro Boy and Speed Racer were instant hits. Then the 80s came along and things like Voltron, Ronin Warriors, and Robotech kept the popularity train moving. Anime will hit its biggest popularity explosion during the 90s and finally begin to take its rightful place in American pop culture mainstream. Early 90s titles like Sailor Moon helped bring in a wider audience, and the medium never looked back. The high demand for anime in 90s America even inspired studios to take chances on Japanese live-action properties as well. Saban began importing and adapting Japanese shows for American audiences with great success. The most famous example being the adaptation of the Japanese live-action superhero series Super Sentai into the still popular American show Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. The 90s would prove to be a golden age for anime as celebrated titles like Neon Genesis Evangelion, Cowboy Bebop, Cardcaptor Sakura, Trigun, and Pokemon would all make their triumphant debuts. Anime would continue to grow in popularity over the next 2 decades, and American anime distribution companies like Funimation and Aniplex grew with that popularity. During the aughts, young American animators who grew up on the medium started to work in the industry and began to use anime for their creative inspiration. Everything from doe eyes to teardrop emotes began to pop up in American animation. Entire series were made that not only incorporated the look of anime, but also drew upon anime for its themes. The best example of these types of shows would be the Avatar saga made by Nickelodeon. Anime has also made a huge impact on film. For decades, it was considered foolish in Japan for a studio to create an animated film or show that was not based on an established property or familiar story. Most early anime was usually based around a long-running manga series or familiar Japanese folklore or history. But in 1985, 2 of Japan's most revered animators, Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata, decided they were tired of not being able to create freely. So they joined forces with Toshio Suzuki, a prominent Japanese producer, and opened up Studio Ghibli. Their goal was to make mostly original works, and their dream became a reality with the 1986 release of Castle in the Sky. While Castle in the Sky's box office returns were modest, it did show that an original Japanese animated piece could do well enough in the marketplace to warrant more. In 2013, Miyazaki announced his retirement from animation, and in 2014, Studio Ghibli announced it was taking a brief pause and would be taking some time to restructure the company. Many took this to mean that Studio Ghibli would not be producing any more animated features, and haven't since the release of 2014's When Marnie Was There. However, in February of 2017, and to the rejoicing of anime fans around the world, Studio Ghibli stated that Hayao Miyazaki was coming out of retirement to write and direct a new animated feature called How Do You Live? This film is slated for a 2020 release. To date, Studio Ghibli has produced 21 animated films. 7 of them are among the 15 highest-grossing animated films to ever come from Japan. Studio Ghibli has also earned international acclaim and awards for all of its films. This includes a Best Animated Feature Oscar in 2003 for its film Spirited Away, thus cementing the studio's place in film history. One of the most appealing parts about anime is that it encompasses every genre you can imagine. No matter what kind of stories you are into, there's an anime out there for you. If you've never watched anime before or have tried and found the many options to be overwhelming, here are a few genre-specific film and show suggestions to help get you started. If you are a fan of science fiction, you should definitely check out the film Ghost in the Shell. It is sharply animated and cerebral in its themes. The story is complex and meaningful. By the end of it, you'll find yourself questioning what it truly means to be human. But if you like your science fiction a little lighter and fair, then you should try a series called Cowboy Bebop. Considered by many to be one of the greatest anime shows of all time, Cowboy Bebop follows a group of ragtag space cowboys as they adventure around the galaxy looking for bounties. It can get serious at times, but it's mostly an action-packed adventure serial. If you're a little more into romance, there are many titles out there waiting for you. I would suggest starting with a show called Ai Yoriyoshi. While on the surface, this show seems like just another harem story, it's actually a love story between the 2 main characters, Aoi and Karu. Their love for each other grows with each episode, despite all of the constant distractions around them. The show is sweet in nature and will leave you with a feeling of warmth and love after watching. If you just want a good laugh, you should go old school with a little show called Rama 1/2. This is a comedy show about a young master martial artist who gets accidentally cursed during a training mission to China. Now, whenever he gets splashed with cold water, he turns into a pretty little red-haired girl, and hilarious insanity always ensues. In this world, everyone is either cursed or the master of some ridiculously specific form of martial arts, like martial arts rhythmic gymnastics. With 7 seasons under its belt, it is also one of the longest-running anime titles ever, so there are plenty of laughs to be had. If you prefer your entertainment to be a little more fanciful, then check out Full Metal Alchemist. It has plenty of magic-oriented action, and it has incredibly rich characters. The show also has a way of making you feel a wide range of emotions all within the same scene, as it can go from light and breezy to solemn and dark in an instant. Are any of you interested in some down-to-earth slice-of-life drama? Then try Himoto Umino-chan. This is the story of a high school girl who presents herself as prim and proper when she's out in public. However, as soon as she gets home, she lets her true colors fly, as she's really an anime-binging, snack-gorging couch potato. It's sweet, funny, and will remind you that it's always okay to just be you. If you are looking for something to watch with your little ones, then try the gold standard for family anime, Pokemon. Each episode is like a little fable lesson. You and your kids will have a great time learning the names of all of the awesome Pokemon creatures, and if that theme song doesn't get you singing, then I don't know what will.
I wanna be the very best, like no one ever was.
Also, I can't recommend the entire Studio Ghibli film library enough. Each one is beautiful, charming, and full of valuable lessons. Almost every single one of them is an animated feature masterpiece that rivals any of the greatest animated films from Disney. There are many more genres that pertain specifically to anime, but I think this is a great place to get you started. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you did, please be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. And until next time, don't be afraid to let your geek flag fly.